welcome to the Powerful Pathways Micro Podcast. I'm Bennie, former senior leader in education and now director of Adara Education, a consultancy that supports leaders to be better aware of EDI. And I'm joined by my colleague, and I'll let her introduce herself.
I'm Malarvilie I'm also a former leader in education and director of MAL CPD, developing leaders in their communication skills and developing their emotional intelligence.
So, our podcasts, these micro podcasts, are designed to explore our experiences as global majority leaders. We have a series of questions which we're just going to talk through and hopefully not make too many jokes along the way. So, the first question we're looking at is, what values did we grow up with as global majority people? Malarvilie, over to you to start us off.
For me, growing up with a Malaysian Tamil background, it was all about education, education, education. And it was about getting as far as you can possibly go in education, do well at school, work really hard. But the other thing was also community. I love being part of going to the temple every Friday and everyone, the whole community eating together. And part of that was the music and dance and growing up with the cultural appreciation of our heritage, really. So that those were three common areas. But I will say that that kind of conflicted with my school life. I kind of felt like I had a double life. So at home, I was Malaysian Indian, and at school, I wasn't sure what I was really, but nobody ever talked about my background. It was never mentioned, so there was no appreciation of that at all. So yeah, how about you, Bennie?
I think it's very similar, actually. So the values of community were really important. And I grew up in an East African Asian household in Leicester, and the community was really close knit. And it was very much geared towards education, as you've said. That was a kind of strong community value. And I think it's because we were immigrants from East Africa, the twice immigrants, India, East Africa to the UK. And I suppose we were sort of conditioned to be ambitious. The idea of striving and working hard was sort of embedded into everything around us. We make jokes about Indian moms. I make jokes about Indian moms driving us forward. But it was combined with this idea of like not rocking the boat. So, be grateful for what you have. If you do well, keep your head down. Don't speak out, be obedient, be well behaved, follow the rules. And I suppose that became kind of those became my watchwords, not just in my schooling, but in my career afterwards. So very similar values, but I really found that one about strive, work hard to be, I suppose that it was supposed to be the panacea, wasn't it? It was the
Yeah.
you grow up, you work hard, you'll do well, you'll get promoted, you will become leaders. And I guess in some ways that wasn't always true. Um, and I suppose, it kind of sets you up with a false sense of security that if you just do those things, then somehow magically you'll end up in leadership positions,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
In fact, I remember in sixth form talking with a few other South Asian friends, and they were saying they really felt the pressure from family and the community that you have to be somebody. And what if they just wanted to be a postman? And it's like, well, yeah, actually, what is wrong with that?
Absolutely. And there was partly that kind of in community rivalry as well.
Mm,
That so and so's child has become a doctor, therefore you must
yeah,
exceed that expectation in some way. And there's a lot of pressure that comes with that, actually.
yeah. It's I always used to call it the three pillars. Was it medicine, accountancy, and law? In fact, when I told my dad that, oh, I'm going to read history, he was like, you mean law? And I was like, no, Dad, I'm going to do a history degree. He's
Yeah.
like, but then you'll convert to law. That's all he had in his head. law. And I was like, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I know. I had the same thing, becoming an English teacher, doing an English degree. Like, what's that for? What is
Yeah,
going to do with that? How are you going
that's
to run a business?
yeah, that's not going to put rice on the table.
No, absolutely not. Security was really important. And I think that's
Yeah,
part of it is that when you are instilled with those values, it comes out of a fear
mm,
from your global majority family that you won't have security long term. Um,
yeah,
and of course, as they say in the famous musical Avenue Q, what do you do with a degree in English?
yeah,
Uh, Turns out the answer is become a teacher.
yeah,
You know. So I guess in some ways our values are very, very similar, in
yeah.
growing up, but I think that's part of a broader global majority.
But both our backgrounds are that double immigration because
Yeah.
my great grandparents went from India to Malaysia, and my parents went from Malaysia to Singapore to
Mm.
um, England. So it's like, well, what bigger risk can you take than going across the other side of the world?
Yeah, absolutely. And, to be able to feel like you're settled in a place, and to belong and to fit in, you have to sort of
Mm,
be obedient and there's always that risk, particularly with my family having left East Africa under the cloud of Idi Amin. And, it was very much if we don't do the right thing, then we might not have this security.
yeah.
But it impacts everything, impacts our whole lives. And I suppose that leads us to the second question, really, doesn't it?
Yes. How have your values changed over time?
I certainly think that the value of obedience has changed. The idea
Yeah.
of obedience. Doing things out of the mold has become my norm.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's actually because I realized, I wasn't the norm. And so to be obedient in those spaces and to kind of toe the line and not rock the boat, those weren't serving me. And so certainly I've seen a change in that. I don't think I've
Mm.
strayed away from the hard work or the commitment.
Yeah.
Um, but I think the one that's probably changed the most is the one that's gone from being a servant leader
Mhm.
um to the detriment perhaps of my own needs, to actually putting myself first and recognizing that I can be a leader
Mm.
without having to be in service all the time. I still think it's a core
Yeah.
value, but not all the time.
Yeah. I think that putting yourself first wasn't a thing when I
Mm,
was growing up. Really, not a thing at all. And I'd say that's a major thing that's changed for me over time. I mean, education is still a huge value for me. Community is still very important to me. But what has really um, I suppose it was always there, but I didn't realize it. It was a sense of belonging.
mm,
And I didn't have it at school and I didn't have it at home. I didn't have it within the Tamil community. I didn't have it, I wasn't allowed to call myself English in East London. And so what was I? And it's whenever I've seen when as a teacher, whenever I saw a child on their own, or even now, the kids are playing and there's one kid on their own, I'm like, oh, I've got to go and save them, or
mm.
I'm one of those people that go on holiday and then adopt somebody. Like, oh, they're on their own. I need to help them. Kind of thing. I saw somebody in the restaurant once, and I was like, "Oh, they're sitting on their own eating. They could come sit with
I
me."
was wondering who those people behind you were.
Yeah,
And I recognize that actually not rocking the boat doesn't mean that you progress. Sometimes you have to speak up. Otherwise
yeah,
it leads to stasis
yeah,
rather, and
yeah.
it's a necessary part of leadership.
What has really stuck with you as a leader in terms of values? What came across for you? What were the positives and the negatives of your core values?
I certainly think that the idea of community and bringing people in has stayed with me. I very much believe that if you get to a position of power, you put the ladder down and you bring people with you.
Yeah.
And we've seen lots of examples in our communities of that not happening, and it
Yeah.
makes me furious, you know,
Yeah.
get to a place of power. How can you bring people with you? And I think that's led to the coaching, that's led to the mentoring, that's led to the training programs, and um, how we build leaders has stayed
Yeah.
with me. And that's a core leader. How do we get people to a point of success,
Yeah.
um, and security as well? And what about
Yeah.
you?
I think that independence and authenticity has stuck with me. It's kind of like a Brighton rock stick, that's all the way through. So I'd be the one in senior team meetings going, you can't do that, that'll upset somebody. You can't do that because that will take away their power to do whatever. You can't make them do that. Have you spoken to them? I'd be like that because not everybody thinks like that. I think they're like, oh, this needs to be done, let's just do it. So that for me is really that came across in my leadership. And in terms of authenticity, that was both a positive and a negative.
In what ways?
Positive in that I was a popular leader in
Yeah.
terms of whatever I put through, I was very empathetic, and it went through smoothly. People were chomping at the bit to help me out, and to make it work, to make it a success. So I got the buy-in. Negative, and this has happened a few times where certain line managers haven't understood my way of challenging.
Mm-mm.
And I challenged, not rudely,
Mm.
but I challenged because I felt it was wrong.
Yeah.
Whatever they were planning was
Yeah.
wrong. And it could be seen as being troublesome.
Yeah, which we know is something we were told not to do. But it's values
Exactly.
rooted in that it's challenge rooted in values. Right? And we took
That's the
come back to
thing.
the
Yeah.
yeah,
Think of it in that terms, then you need to challenge. You
yeah.
have to be true to yourself.
Mm.
Otherwise, how can you, I mean, um, I can't shut up. I can't just
I
not
wasn't
say
going to say
anything.
it.
For a long time, I had my mother's voice in my head going, don't say anything, don't say anything. And I'd hesitate for decades and decades. But like, I don't know, maybe it's being in my 50s. I
Mm.
don't care anymore. It's
Yeah, yeah.
wrong, and I'm going to say it.
Yeah. And I wish people learned that earlier,
Yeah,
actually without the fear of I'm going to be seen as aggressive, I'm going to be seen as
yeah,
troublesome, or I've got
yeah,
a chip on my shoulder, which, we know are the things that are said about global majority people
mm,
in particular. So, it
yeah,
comes back to this, how much can we stick to our values? But we don't need to wait until our 50s
yeah,
until we start speaking up.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. We wanted to let you know about a very special opportunity. I'm going to let you explain it, Malarvilie.
Okay, so Benny and I have put together a course called Powerful Pathways. It's all the P's,
All
so
the people.
that it's about exploring themes like this, about your values, about authenticity, as who you want to be as a leader. And the link to the course is in the comments, and you can find out more there.
Brilliant. I hope we have lots of people joining us,
Yeah, it'd be
and
great.
more conversation, more laughter, more truth.